Some childhood memories stick with you forever, not because they were happy, but because they left a scar. This one in particular still haunts me, even now. It happened during spring break in March of 2015 when I was 11 years old. My older sister and I were staying with our grandparents for a week in their rural farmhouse outside of Missoula, Montana. It was the kind of place that felt frozen in time. No internet, barely any cell signal, and neighbors so far away you could scream and no one would hear. Our parents had gone to Mexico for an anniversary trip and wanted us to have some offline time with our grandparents. I didn't mind at first. I liked the idea of open land, farm animals, and staying up late watching old movies. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. We helped gather eggs, fed the chickens, and played board games by the fire at night. One evening, my sister and I were outside just before sunset, trying to fly this old plastic kite we found in the shed. The wind was just right, and we chased it around the pasture, laughing and yelling. That's when I saw someone standing near the edge of the tree line, just beyond the tall grass. At first, I thought it was my grandpa, but he was still inside. The figure wasn't moving, just standing there, half-shadowed by the trees. I couldn't make out any details. It was too far and the light was fading, but I could tell something felt off. I nudged my sister and pointed. When she looked, the figure was gone. She shrugged it off, said maybe I saw a deer or a post or something. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. That night, I had trouble sleeping. My room faced the back fields and the windows had no blinds, just thin curtains that fluttered every time the heater kicked on. I lay in bed, staring at the pale outline of the trees through the glass. For a moment, I thought I saw movement between them again, but it was gone just as quickly. I told myself it was wind or an animal. Still, I ended up pulling the covers over my head like a little kid. The next day was cloudy and colder. My grandparents didn't let us go far, so we mostly stayed inside. But sometime after lunch, I noticed something strange. One of the scarecrows in the cornfield near the barn looked different. It wasn't just its posture. It was slightly slouched, but it was also wearing a black hoodie. I'd never seen a scarecrow dressed like that. When I asked my grandpa about it, he frowned and said there were only 2 scarecrows on the property, and both wore old overalls and straw hats. We went outside to check, but by the time we got there, the scarecrow in the black hoodie was gone. I'll never forget how my grandfather's expression changed. His eyes narrowed, and he scanned the tree line for a long time before turning back toward the house. He didn't say anything else about it, just told us to stay indoors for the rest of the day. That night, the wind picked up hard. I could hear it howling across the empty fields and rattling the loose corners of the old house. Around midnight, I was woken up by a noise. It sounded like something brushing against the side of the house, followed by a faint tapping on the window. I froze. The room was pitch dark except for the blinking red light on my digital clock. At first, I thought maybe it was a tree branch, but there were no trees close to the window, just open grass and fence line. Then the tapping came again, more deliberate, like knuckles. I was too scared to move. I just stared at the curtain, heart thudding in my ears. I didn't want to look, but something told me I had to. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, crawled to the side of the window, and gently pulled back the curtain just an inch. Standing outside, barely an arm's length from the glass, was a man. His face was obscured by the shadow of a hood, but his body was perfectly still. He was tall, thin, and his hands hung at his sides like dead weight. I couldn't see his eyes, just the reflection of my own terrified face in the window pane. He didn't move, didn't react to me looking at him, just stood there, facing the house. I scrambled backward and bolted down the hallway to my grandparents' room, practically screaming. My grandfather leapt out of bed, grabbed his old hunting rifle, and told my grandma to call the sheriff. We all stayed in the hallway while he went outside to check. When he returned, he said no one was there, but there were fresh footprints in the mud under my window, real ones. The sheriff came out the next morning. He looked around the property, asked some questions, but didn't seem very concerned. Said it was probably some local teenager playing a prank. My grandfather didn't believe that. He installed extra locks on the doors that afternoon and put up motion lights by the back windows. I noticed he also kept his rifle close after that. 2 nights later, the motion lights outside went off at exactly 3 a.m. I wasn't asleep. I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed, staring out at the glowing backyard, waiting. The lights turned off after a minute. Then they came back on. And standing in the middle of the field was that same man. He was facing the house again, arms still at his sides. I watched, frozen, as he tilted his head slowly, like he was studying the windows. Then he began walking, slowly, deliberately, toward the back of the house. I jumped up and ran to wake everyone. This time, my grandfather didn't wait. He fired a warning shot out the back door. When we looked again, the man was gone, just vanished into the dark. The sheriff came back the next morning. Again, there were footprints in the field, same shoes, same size. They led from the woods to the back of the house and then disappeared, like the man had just walked off into nothing. We left early. My parents came back from their trip 2 days later and picked us up. My grandparents never said much about it after that, and we never stayed there overnight again. But I still remember that face, or lack of it. That blank, shadowed hood, that unshakable sense that whoever or whatever was outside that window wasn't just passing through. It was waiting, watching. Sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up and think I hear tapping again. Just faint, just enough to make me listen. And I always wonder, what would have happened if I'd opened that window? Or if we hadn't left when we did? Some questions are better left unanswered, but I still don't sleep with the curtains open. Ever. I always thought the late-night shift was peaceful, quiet, undisturbed, almost therapeutic. But after what happened last Friday, I'll never step into that parking garage alone again. It was close to 1 a.m. when I finally logged off and packed up my things. The office was deserted. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of old vents. I took the elevator down to B2, where the employee lot was. The doors opened with a mechanical chime, and immediately, a wave of cold air hit me. That part of the garage was always colder than the rest of the building, but that night, it felt almost unnatural. I stepped out. My footsteps echoed in the silence, the kind that feels too still, like the world's holding its breath. Only a few cars were left in the lot, mine included. I had parked near the far wall under one of the flickering lights. As I walked, I could hear my own footsteps reverberating off the concrete. But then, about halfway to my car, I heard something else. Another set of footsteps. Slower, offbeat from mine. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I turned around. Nothing. Just rows of cars and dim lighting. I let out a small laugh, trying to shake it off. Probably just my echo bouncing weirdly. I kept walking, this time quicker. Then I heard it again. This time it was unmistakable. It wasn't an echo. Someone was walking behind me, matching my pace. I whipped around, scanning the lot. Still nothing. But I wasn't imagining it. I could feel it. That crawling sensation at the back of your neck, like you're being watched. I hurried to my car, heart pounding, keys ready in my hand. I got in, slammed the door shut, and locked it instantly. I sat there for a second, breathing heavily, my eyes darting around the garage. That's when I saw him. A man, standing in the shadows between 2 cars. Still, silent, just watching me. His face was mostly hidden under a hood, but I could see his outline. He didn't move, didn't react, just stared. I started the engine. The headlights lit up the space in front of me, and the man was gone. I blinked, leaned forward, peering between the cars. Empty. I didn't waste any more time. I pulled out and drove straight toward the exit ramp. But as I approached the gate, I realized something chilling. The arm wasn't lifting. I scanned my access card again. Nothing. I tried the call button on the intercom. No answer. I reversed slightly, getting ready to ram it if I had to, but then I noticed movement in the rearview mirror. The man was standing at the other end of the garage, not running, not even walking. Just standing, watching. And then, slowly, he started walking toward me. I honked the horn, shouted from inside the car, but he didn't flinch. Just kept coming. I backed up instinctively, trying to give myself more space. The garage felt tighter now, like the walls were pressing inward. My heart slammed in my chest. Suddenly, the arm of the exit gate rose with a mechanical groan. I didn't question it. I floored the gas and shot up the ramp, headlights bouncing wildly off the concrete. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I pulled over a few blocks away to catch my breath. I checked the back seat, checked the trunk. Nothing. I was alone. The next day, I reported it to security. They brushed it off, saying no one else had access to the garage that late. They even reviewed the footage. But here's the thing. They showed me the recording. It showed me walking to my car, alone. No one else appeared on the tape. No man in the shadows, no one following me. They even showed the angle from the exit gate. Nothing. I asked if maybe the cameras were malfunctioning or if someone had tampered with them. They shrugged, said it must have been a late-night hallucination from too much overtime. But I know what I saw. The worst part. That same night, someone keyed my car. One long, deep scratch along the driver's side door. Just one word. Soon. I've transferred to a different office since then. I don't stay late anymore. I park on the street, even if it means walking further. But some nights, when I get to my car and check the rearview mirror, I swear I still see him, just standing there, waiting. For the last 19 years, I've served as a deputy sheriff in a rural town in northern Wyoming. Quiet, peaceful, mostly uneventful, the kind of place where neighbors still wave when they pass, and the most common calls are about livestock in the road or teenagers drinking by the lake. But just because things are quiet doesn't mean they're safe. Evil doesn't announce itself. It creeps in silently, unnoticed, until it's too late. It was October 2017. The nights were already getting cold, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. I was on patrol just outside of town, near the foothills, where the woods grow thick and the roads turn to gravel. Dispatch had radioed about a missing person, young woman, early 20s. Name was April Hennings. She hadn't shown up for her shift at the diner, and her parents hadn't heard from her since the night before. Normally, we don't panic right away. People go off the radar for a day or two all the time. But there was something strange about this one. Her car was found abandoned just a few miles from town, near an old logging road that hadn't been used in years. No sign of forced entry. Doors locked, keys still in the ignition, and a single shoe on the driver's side floorboard. I drove out there just before midnight. The area was dark, no street lights, just dense pine forest pressing in on both sides. My cruiser's headlights barely cut through the fog that had started to roll in. I parked just behind April's car and stepped out, flashlight in hand. The air was still. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. Just an eerie kind of silence that made every crunch of gravel under my boots sound too loud. As I approached the car, I noticed something strange. All the windows were rolled up except the back passenger side, which was cracked just an inch, enough to let air in, or maybe let something out. I shone my flashlight inside. The interior was spotless. No blood, no struggle, nothing. Just that one shoe and an open bottle of water in the cup holder. Then I saw the footprints, barefoot, heading away from the car and into the woods. At first, I assumed they were hers. Maybe she got scared. Maybe she was being followed. I radioed dispatch to let them know I was going to follow the trail and headed into the tree line. The woods out there are thick, almost unnatural. The trees grow close together, and the deeper you go, the harder it is to tell direction. The beam from my flashlight bounced between trunks, catching movement that never seemed to be there when I looked straight at it. The footprints continued, weaving through underbrush and disappearing briefly in patches of dead leaves. I followed them for about 20 minutes, heart pounding harder the deeper I went. Then I found the cabin. It was old, half collapsed, covered in moss and vines. The kind of place that should have been torn down decades ago. The windows were boarded up from the inside. The front door was slightly ajar. Every instinct in my body told me to call for backup. But something else, a need to know what happened to that girl, pulled me forward. I pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. Inside, it smelled of rot and wet wood. My flashlight swept across the room. Shattered furniture, old hunting gear, a torn mattress, and a trap door in the floor. Fresh scratches around the edges. It had been opened recently. I took a step forward, and the floor groaned loudly beneath me. That's when I heard it. A soft whimper, faint, female, coming from below. I radioed dispatch again. Possible location on the missing person. Old hunting cabin. Coordinates coming now. I'm checking the basement. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. I reached down, gripped the handle, and opened the trap door. The smell hit me first. Decay, sweat, urine. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes. I descended the creaking wooden steps into near-total darkness. My flashlight illuminated a small dirt cellar. The walls were lined with shelves full of glass jars, some filled with old meat, some with things I couldn't identify. There was a single cot in the corner, shackles bolted to the wall, and April. She was curled in the corner, eyes wide, dirty and trembling. Her wrist was still locked in one of the shackles. She didn't say anything, just stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. I rushed over, keying my shoulder mic. I found her. She's alive. Get EMS out here now. I freed her and carried her upstairs. As we reached the top step, she whispered something that made my blood run cold. He's still out there. That's when I heard the thud, from outside. I drew my weapon, stepped to the side of the doorway, and peeked through a gap in the boards. There was a man, tall, wearing a filthy jacket, face half covered by a mask made of what looked like stitched leather. He was holding a machete. I gently laid April down behind a broken cabinet and whispered for her not to move. Then I stepped out onto the porch, weapon drawn. "Sheriff's Department, drop the weapon." He didn't. He stared at me for a few seconds, tilted his head slowly to the side, and then ran. I chased him through the woods, my breath ragged, branches clawing at my face. But he knew the terrain. I didn't. Within minutes, he vanished into the trees. I searched for over an hour, but he was gone. Backup finally arrived and medics took April away. She survived, physically at least, but she hasn't spoken much since. What little she did tell us was horrifying. He'd been watching her for weeks. He knew her schedule, her route to work, where she parked. He didn't just grab her at random. He hunted her. We searched the woods for days, Brought in dogs, even drones. Never found him, but we did find other cabins. Not as intact, but the signs were there. Shackles, personal items, clothes that didn't belong to April. There may have been others. That case still haunts me, not just because of what happened, but because I never caught him. I still patrol those same roads, and every now and then I get a report. A car left abandoned, footprints leading into the trees, a missing person. And I wonder, did he come back, or did he never leave? When I close my eyes at night, I still see that mask. I still hear April's whisper. He's still out there. And sometimes I believe her. When I moved into my new apartment building, I was just trying to start over. A bad breakup, a job transfer, and a desperate need for a fresh start had brought me here. The building was nothing special, just a faded red brick complex on the edge of the city. But the rent was affordable, and it had decent reviews. I didn't ask for much, just quiet neighbors and a place to sleep. For the most part, that's what I got. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves. There was a retired couple downstairs, a college student next door who I rarely saw, and then there was the man in Unit 3B. He moved in about a week after I did. No one saw a moving truck or any furniture being brought in. One day the unit was empty and the next, it wasn't. I only knew someone had moved in because I started hearing the lock turn late at night. Always around the same time, 2:13 a.m. I checked the clock. Every time. At first, I thought maybe he worked nights, but it kept happening, even on weekends. I'd hear the lock click, the door creak open, and then footsteps, slow, deliberate ones, always heading into the apartment without a word. No talking, no music, just silence. And then the occasional soft thud of movement. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just a neighbor with a weird schedule. But then I started noticing other things. One night I went down to grab my mail and saw him, just a glimpse, as he stepped into his unit. He was tall and thin, wearing a long dark coat despite the heat. What stood out most, though, was that he didn't carry a key. He just touched the door handle and it opened. I brushed it off. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe he had one of those keyless locks. Still, something about the way he moved, like he was gliding instead of walking, sent a chill down my spine. The next few days, I tried to avoid the hallway at night. But I started hearing things. Scratching. Not like rats, no, this was rhythmic. Almost like someone dragging their fingernails down a wall, slowly. And it always came from the same place, the wall I shared with Unit 3B. It got worse. One night, around 2 a.m., I was half asleep when I heard it again. The scratching. Then something new. Breathing. Heavy, slow breathing right outside my bedroom wall. I sat up, heart racing, and pressed my ear against the wall. It stopped. I held my breath and waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Nothing. Just when I was about to pull away, I heard a whisper. Faint. Garbled. I couldn't make out the words. I stumbled back from the wall, heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake the entire floor. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went down to the front office and asked about the man in Unit 3B. The manager, a woman in her 60s named Carla, looked confused. "There's no one in 3B, she said. I blinked. "No, there is. I've heard him coming and going. Tall guy, wears a coat, moved in about a week after me." She shook her head. "3B's been empty for months. No lease, no keys signed out, nothing. You sure you're not thinking of 3A? I assured her I wasn't. Carla agreed to humor me. She grabbed the spare keys and we went upstairs together. When she opened the door to 3B, my stomach turned. The apartment was empty. Not empty like someone had just moved out. Empty like no one had ever lived there. Dust covered the counters. The fridge wasn't plugged in. No lights, no furniture, no sign of life. But the smell, something sharp, metallic like rust or blood, hit me as soon as we stepped inside. Carla wrinkled her nose. That's weird. She tried flipping the light switch, but nothing happened. Power's not even on. I couldn't explain it. I knew I had heard him, seen him, felt his presence through the walls. We left, and Carla promised to change the locks just in case someone was squatting. That night, I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was someone sneaking in. A homeless guy who found a way to get inside. That would explain the sounds, the movement, the weird smell, right? But that didn't explain what happened next. Around 2 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. Not in the hallway this time, but inside the walls. They started behind the wall I shared with 3B, then moved along the length of my apartment. Slow, dragging steps like someone pulling something heavy. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the wall. Nothing, but the sounds didn't stop. Then the scratching started again. Not on the wall, on my bedroom door. I froze. 3 slow scrapes, like nails on wood. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. My door was locked, I had made sure of it, but that didn't comfort me. Another scratch. Then, a voice, not a whisper this time. It was deep, raspy, and right on the other side of the door. I see you. I screamed and backed into the corner, dialing 911 with shaking hands. But before the call even connected, the scratching stopped. The air in the room suddenly felt ice cold. My phone flickered. The screen went black. Then silence. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they searched the whole apartment. Nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. No one in the hallway. The officer took a report and left, telling me to call if anything else happened. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. I kept the lights on and stayed curled up on the couch, staring at the front door. Carla called me the next day. She sounded shaken, said she'd gone back into 3B with a maintenance guy to change the locks like she promised. Only when they opened the door this time, it wasn't empty. There were markings on the walls, long, claw-like gouges, dark stains on the carpet. The smell was worse now, almost unbearable. They found something in the back bedroom, a coat. Long, black, and stiff with what looked like dried blood. They called the cops again. This time they sealed the apartment. A few days later, a crew came in to board it up completely. I moved out the same week. I still don't know what I saw or heard. I've tried convincing myself it was all a bad dream, a breakdown from stress. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night in my new place, I swear I still hear it, a scrape, a breath, and a voice whispering from the walls, I see you. A few years ago, I took a job that required me to relocate to a small town in Oregon. It wasn't somewhere I'd ever pictured myself living, quieter than I was used to, surrounded by forest on all sides, and far removed from the rhythm of the city. But the job paid well, and I figured a slower pace wouldn't be such a bad thing. I rented a modest townhouse on the edge of town, nestled in a wooded area with only a few neighbors nearby. It was peaceful, serene even, the kind of place where you could hear the wind through the trees at night, or the faint calls of owls echoing in the dark. I adjusted quickly to the quiet, enjoying the solitude that came with it. My work was mostly remote, but once a week I had to drive into the city for meetings. These were long days, usually ending late in the evening, and by the time I got home, I was too tired to cook. There was a small diner in town, open late, known for their sandwiches and soups, and I often placed orders for pickup on my way back. One Thursday night, after an especially long day, I called in an order like usual. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the sky was already pitch black when I pulled into the diner's parking lot. The lot was empty except for a single dark sedan idling near the entrance. Its headlights were off, and the driver's silhouette was just barely visible through the windshield. I thought little of it at the time. Maybe someone else picking up an order. I went inside, got my food, and headed home. The drive back took about 10 minutes. My street was unlit, save for the occasional porch light, and my unit sat at the very end, backing up to a dense patch of trees. As I pulled into my driveway, I caught sight of a car driving slowly past the other end of the street. It was hard to tell, but something about it looked familiar. I brushed it off, probably a neighbor or someone lost, and went inside. After eating, I settled into the couch to unwind. The forest outside was especially loud that night. I could hear branches swaying in the wind and the occasional crack of something moving through the underbrush. I told myself it was just wildlife. It usually was. Around 11 p.m., I went through my usual nighttime routine, locking the front and back doors, checking the windows. I always made sure the back patio door was secured. Beyond it was a small covered deck that led out to the trees. There were no street lights back there, just shadows. I had just turned off the last of the lights and was heading toward the bedroom when I heard it. A faint knock. Not from the front door, from the back. It was so soft I thought I imagined it at first. But then it came again. 3 light taps, spaced apart, deliberate. I froze. My first thought was that it had to be an animal, maybe a branch knocked loose. But something about the rhythm of it, it was too even, too intentional. I moved slowly toward the back of the house, heart pounding. The patio door had blinds, but there was a small gap where 2 of them didn't fully close. I leaned in, careful not to make noise, and looked through the crack. Someone was standing just outside. He was barely visible, standing completely still beneath the edge of the roof overhang. No flashlight, no phone light, just standing there, almost blending into the dark. He wore a hooded jacket and jeans. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could tell he was staring straight at the door. I backed away immediately, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't recognize him. No one should have been back there. That part of the property wasn't accessible without walking directly through the woods, or around to the back of the house from the street. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered what was happening, trying to keep my voice steady. She told me to stay on the line and keep quiet. Officers were on their way. While I waited, I crept to the front of the house and peered through the living room window. That's when I saw the same dark sedan I'd noticed at the diner, parked just down the street, engine off, lights out. He'd followed me. The dispatcher was still on the line when I heard movement again, a slow creak from the back deck. He was trying the door. The handle shifted gently, quietly, like he was testing it. Then came a soft scraping sound, metal against metal. He had something, a tool maybe. He was trying to pick the lock. I felt paralyzed, caught between fear and disbelief. This wasn't some drunk neighbor or a prank. This was calculated. I whispered the update to the dispatcher, and she told me officers were turning onto my street. Not a minute later, flashing lights lit up the front yard. The sedan down the street started to move, its engine sputtering to life. I ran to the window and watched as 2 patrol cars swerved in, blocking the road. One officer jumped out and approached the car with his weapon drawn, while the other came to my door, knocking firmly. I let him in, hands trembling. The man at the back had fled the moment the lights appeared. The officers searched the area but didn't find him. They did find fresh shoe prints leading from the woods to my back porch. Deep, deliberate prints in the soft earth. He'd come through the trees. The sedan driver was not the same person. He told officers he was waiting for someone, but something in his story didn't hold up. They detained him for questioning, and I gave a full report. The next day, I installed motion lights and bought new locks for every door. Police increased patrols near my street, and the department promised to keep me updated. A few days later, a detective called. They had reviewed security footage from the diner. The man who followed me had been sitting in the sedan for nearly an hour before I arrived. He hadn't ordered anything, just waited. He watched me go in, watched me come out, then trailed me all the way home. Worse, they discovered he had done this before, tracking people, following them from public places to their homes. He hadn't been caught until now because he was careful, quiet, calculated. Though the police were able to eventually identify and arrest him, I never got a clear answer about why he chose me. There was no connection, no motive, just opportunity. It's been years since that night, but the memory still lingers. I still live in the same place, but I never truly relax anymore. I check every window before bed. I watch the woods. I installed cameras that alert my phone to every flicker of movement, because now I know that danger doesn't always announce itself with violence or noise. Sometimes it just waits quietly outside your door, hoping you'll open it. And sometimes it follows you home when you think you're safe.